Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so this is the Q&A session. We're going to spend about 20 minutes or so on the Q&A session. If you could keep your questions as brief as possible so we could get as many in as possible. If you could also wait till I give you the microphone so that everyone can hear. If your question's for the panel, please just say it's for the panel. If it's for a specific individual, please identify who that individual is you'd like to ask the question to. So, who would like to be first? Yep, excellent. Hey.
This is really for Malcolm and Ron and Malcolm, right? There's more comments. So to Ron, it's fascinating here you talk about the Bermuda Triangle. And the Bermuda Triangle is, like, we think it was a major problem with the space shuttle missions. And that NASA had to program the computers and all the rest when it went over it, because it's probably what we call a mascon, which is a gravitational, some weird gravitational effect when the Earth. And I think there must be, you maybe know more than me, but there must be other Bermuda Triangles in the world, because there should be. And we have these mascons on the moon as well, which we have to be, when we're going back to the moon with Artemis, this has to be, it was a problem for astronauts. Cryptozoology is fascinating. You all know about I can't pronounce it, chupacabras. I'm so dyslexic and I can't. But we are finding new species of weird animals. I remember a few years back in Vietnam, there's a whole lot of new animals. And without hogging it, one for Malcolm, I grew up in Linwood, and there was the curse of Lady Anne Spears, and you can Google that one. It's a bit of we used to, as a kid, you were scared that if you knocked down that old church, Lady Anne Spears was buried underneath it, there would be a curse. And lo and behold, it would bring disaster to Linwood, and we would run past it at night when we were wee boys, And Lady Anne Spears wasn't actually buried in that church. She was a devout Presbyterian, but she was buried in Houston Cemetery. But there was another, it was a spear, Anne Spear. And in 1981, they demolished the church. What happened in Linwood? Our community was destroyed with the closure of the car factory, which people said, that's the curse. And when it shut down, the bank shut down, all the shops, and the highest unemployment and male unemployment in the UK. So there we are.
Sorry, is that work? Oh yeah, it's working, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I think there were several questions in amongst that. But I'll just deal a bit with the Bermuda Triangle. As you quite rightly point out, there are several areas which you might call another Bermuda Triangle. There was a chap whose name I've just forgotten, who wrote a book back in 1970 called The Invisible Residence. Quite well known at the time. But he made this very point, that there were other areas that, this kind of phenomenon that was associated with the Bermuda Triangle. But the thing is, the Bermuda Triangle got all that publicity because what's his name got here? Old age creeping up. Some chap wrote, wrote a book, which of course just kind of took the world by storm. So ever after then, anything that was anomalous was associated with the Bermuda Triangle. And so, I think there could well be a physical phenomena going on there. But on the other hand, there could be a supernatural as well. I'm hedging my bets here, because I think not everything that's happened there can be explained away, particularly the aircraft, not being able to identify where they were, which is really strange. Right, I'll pass you on. I think Malcolm was...
I know nothing. That's coloured water at my feet, by the way. Anybody's listening, that's coloured water. Bermuda Triangle, if you remember a guy called Richard Weiner, he wrote more or less the first book about the Devil's Triangle. He called it the Devil's Triangle. There's one off the coast of Japan as well, where strange, mysterious disturbances, ships go amiss, etc. A lot of it could just be weather conditions. There's so many theories and postulations about what's in the Bermuda Triangle. They're not denying that there's something clearly happening within the confines of that area. as indeed they are with many other areas throughout this planet. There's certain portals or window areas or hot spots where strange things happen. And the Bermuda Triangle is quite an interesting one. Charles Berlitz and Bill Moore was really, as Ron says, you brought it to prominence. Anybody else want to talk about that? Okay, anybody else?
Okay, in that case...
Thanks for the question, thank you.
Who's got the next question? Yep.
Hi. I'd like to put my question to Ron and Malcolm. Firstly, it was, do you think the Foo Fighters that were reported during the Second World War, balls of light, do you think they were man-made? Talking about, the Germans had that technology, or are they outer worldly? Secondly, the Dutchmont UFO, there was a theory that it could have been a Russian, a Soviet satellite that was remote controlled, or it malfunctioned and it came down. It just so happened to be there. Again, or could it have been extraterrestrial? There is when I read these things about, say, the Foo Fighters were, say, German technology, it makes me a bit sceptical. It is, and the same with the Dutchmont UFO. So, just wondering.
No, I mean, I think I wouldn't disagree with you there. I mean, there's always claims about the German Nazi technology, specifically, that these things were being built, and if the war had gone on for a little bit longer, the Germans would have had these supersonic or spacecraft or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of things in the supernatural. When you start to investigate things, it gets hard to pin things down. You get claims and you get counterclaims, and it really gets quite confusing. So sometimes I'm never quite sure what to take seriously. Like the sub I talked about, which allegedly was attacked by a sea monster. Then other people say, yeah, well, it never happened, and the captain never said it. So, I mean, where do you pin down the truth of things? I mean, it is sometimes difficult to be sure exactly what's taken place.
I mean, obviously, the Foo Fighters, there's no denying it. There was these balls of fire in the Theatre of War during the Second World War, seen by the Germans, the Italians, and the British. And each of, as you know, thought it was a secret weapon of the others. To this day, they're not entirely sure what that was, but they're not denying there was some out there taking an interest in the Theatre of War. As for the Decmont Woods, yes, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of theories. It's in my book. There's about 11 theories to explain what happened to Robert Taylor, and one of which the yet poisonous berries, which no seasoned guy who works in a forestry department, there's poison berries, I'll have some of them. You're not going to do it, But any researcher, and we're all researchers here, we've got to look at the other side of the coin, because, like I said a moment ago, even though there is, for me, 100% life after death, I'm still sceptical. Any haunted house I go into, you've got to check what's there. But Decmont, for me, just before I pass it on, absolutely the real deal. That forestry worker saw that craft. By God, he did. And crazy. Right, I'll pass it on. Anybody want to answer these questions, by the way? Thanks for the question, Jim.
Any other questions? Yep. I'll take this gentleman here simply because he's closer.
We'll get somebody else to answer it this time.
Yeah. Has anybody heard of an island between Ireland and Britain? And it's called, no, it's not between, correction, it's between America and Ireland. It's called High Brazil, and it only becomes visible every 4 years or so. You do you?
Hey.
Yes, you have heard of it. Right.
Read it was just a short article on it, but I have heard about it.
Yes.
And it intrigued me because I come from Ayr originally, and I was always intrigued by Arran across the water, which some days you could see and some days you couldn't because of the atmosphere and the clouds and things like that. And this reminded me of the magical Avalon that appeared and disappeared, and I was quite into Arthurian legends at that point. So there are stories of islands that appear and disappear throughout mythology. Now, I don't know about High Brazil. I don't know if it's, real or not, or whether it's...
I just read about it in a book many years ago, and I just wonder if any of our professionals on the platform have picked up on it in their reading matter. The fact of the matter is that obviously due to timing, weather conditions has been picked up on, and other atmospheric conditions, electromagnetic, EMF fields, etc., prevailing at the time, then these come into the third dimension and then go back out into the fourth or fifth spontaneously, I think. Thanks very much anyway.
Hello. First of all, well done to everybody. They were all fantastic talks today. Really enjoyed it. My question's for Alison, and I didn't realise you're an Ayr native as I am, so fellow Ayr person. A couple of years ago at one of these conferences, I hope you don't mind me going slightly off topic of your talk, you were saying about how you're becoming, training to become an exorcist, and now today in the introduction it says you are one, so congratulations. And what I wanted to ask is, since I've never met an exorcist before in real life, have you had the occasion to actually attend such a situation? And if you have done, what was your personal take? Did that person have mental illness, or was there some sort of actual possession happening?
Thank you for your question. The exorcism that I did was not on a person, it was on a property where strange anomalies had been happening, including noises, bangs, snaps, those kind of noises, and flooding, and just a general feeling of there's somebody else in this house. And I did an exorcism, and it worked extremely well. Nothing else happened. And in fact, the whole atmosphere lifted in place, and you could feel it. Before, it was this kind of unpleasant, heavy atmosphere, and afterwards it was just lifted. It worked very, very well. It was a bit of a combination of a Christian and pagan exorcism that I did, because I've been involved in the pagan community as well. So those beliefs haven't just been chucked away, just because of the other things that I found out. But yeah, that answers your question.
So in the afternoon we heard, Ron, you speak about the possibility of alien life forms underwater, potentially as a malevolent force, with the Titanic speculation. Lorraine, in the morning we heard from you about alien presence, again, under the ocean, but not specifically an attacking force, if you like. So there seems to be a little bit of maybe a conflict. Are we talking about different sets of aliens here, or is there some confusion about how much they intervene with us directly?
Well, I don't know about what Ron talks about. I'm not familiar with all the, what it could have been. I do, there's lots of cases with you see the videos going in and out of the water. This is confirmed in the Allies of Humanity briefings, where it says that they have that's where they stay in order to hide. Then you put that with the rocket ships that happened in Sweden. There's where they just, in the 1950s, they saw these rockets come and land and like embed themselves in the bottoms of lakes and never came back. There was lots of witnesses for that. So I don't know the connection, but it wouldn't surprise me if something has hit it. Or I saw a case the other day where a 10-foot white shark had been taken very quickly to the bottom of the ocean, and the temperature changed. And I do know that these beings need food. They're like us, you know, they're just physical beings. So, but obviously I can't tell you the specifics. I just know their presence is here, and they do, you know, they influence us. And I know that Paul Sinclair has talked about a fishing boat that died in the water when it was over this craft. And my friend Ted Rowe is a diver, and he had divers say that they saw craft underneath dolphins. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's been clashes between physical and, you know, what I'm talking about. Ron, do you want to respond?
Yeah, well, all I'll say on that really is, you know, I just put that forward as one speculation about a mystery of the sea, and that some people had argued that there were underwater civilizations. And what I was trying to say was that maybe some of these ideas had sprung from, you know, another idea about Atlantis, you know, sinking beneath the waves. And that could maybe explain how some of these ideas have come up. I mean, I don't know, for example, what sunk the Titanic. I mean, all I was trying to do was to give some indications of some other possible explanations about what had happened. You know, maybe there are underwater civilizations down there. But I will agree that, you know, you need a fair amount of proof before you could accept that as a genuine possibility. But people have claimed to have seen UFOs coming up from beneath the waves, you know, on seas, oceans, and on lochs. So, you know, the idea kind of lives on. How truthful or how factual it is, yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's down to speculation. Anybody else? Okay.
Very, very briefly, USOs, unidentified submersible objects, is a big fact of life. It's not just UFOs or UAPs, as you like to call them these days. There, as Ron quite rightly says, there's a multitude of people seeing strange lights and things under the oceans, and it's not just group shows of fluorescent fish. It's clearly something different. The work of Paul Sinclair is absolutely fantastic. I do suggest each and every one of you get his truth-proof books. I'm going to pass this over. Do you want anybody want to say something else?
The only instance I've had of something to do with the sea was the Fourth Estuary in Edinburgh. There was a lady interviewed with an episode we did about the haunted hospitals of Edinburgh, and she claims that when she moved from Aberdeen down to her house in Granton, that the first day she was there, she sighted a ball of fire out in the middle of the Forth. And that was about it. That was all have I heard anything, Kerry?
Sea person, to be honest.
Sea person.
Recently in America, there's been the Disclosure Project, which has been suggested as a training program to bring us to the reality of aliens. Do you believe that, or the other conspiracy that it's actually preparation for a false flag for things like even New World Order, or to sort of promote financial gain for others around the world?
There's a question and a half, isn't it? I'll give you my take on it. I'd like to give the other panellists a shot at a stab at this one as well. Having been involved with ufology for over 40 odd years, I do believe that the British government, American government, and many other governments world over know far more than they're letting on about the UFO enigma, the problem. We saw that with the release of the Freedom of Information Act. Many pre-classified government document files clearly showed that the FBI, the CIA, and the other agencies were involved with this. They're getting back to this It was always kept quiet. The big Project Blue Book, Project Grudge was swept under the carpet. Now, since then, the USS Nimitz, USS Theodore Roosevelt in 2004, 2007 dispatched all these Navy jets and managed to capture these wonderful tic-tac, they call it a tic-tac, go fast and gimbal. Now, either that's our own technology, and if it is, why we're not using it, or it's the Chinese, or it's the Russians, or the South Koreans. But there's clearly something in their skies. Now, are we looking at, as your question states there, as a new world order? Where are we going with all this information? Because clearly, we're seeing it all the time. Back in 2001, the press club in America, all these generals, just like we are here just now, all the Brave, the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, yes, at last, we're going to get an answer to the UFO enigma. And it was yesterday's news. But before I pass it on, I think, is it going to happen in my lifetime? Are we going to get disclosure? The main thing for me, before I pass it on, we're dealing with a real bona fide UFO presence. It's always been with us. It's been in the skies since time immemorial. But as to what they want is another question. We could go into UFO abductions, which I would do. Who wants this one?
If I understand you correctly, what Marshall talks about, where disclosure is concerned, the governments really don't, they know something, but they don't know everything. Where the real secrets are held are in the Department of Defense and the beings that really control all the information. Now, as it happens, I had the good fortune to be married to an astrophysicist who worked for the DoD. And they had broken apart, as far as I can understand, trouble is he died before I was interested in this subject. But he would tell me that he would work on technology that did no possible way it came from this earth. And the way it worked is they break up craft, they break up so that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. Now, Marshall also talks about why are we, okay, admittedly, yes, we would all like to know, we'd all like to know what the government knows, but they're never, in my view, going to admit that there's something out there that they can't defend against. The second thing I'd like to say about that is this is the way these cunning little beggars work. They get us to focus on our government, don't they? That's what I was saying earlier. They get us to focus on our government and demand disclosure from our government. Why are we not demanding disclosure from the aliens themselves? This is our planet. They've been interfering here for a long time. Why we focus on our government, which just drives us further apart and makes us distrust more? Why are we not calling on the aliens themselves to state your business? This is our planet. We're the ones that have evolved to live here. But to say whether, I think they do drip feed a little bit of information, but I don't think we'll ever get what they truly know. That's combination of the Allies and Marshall's talk and my personal feeling on it.
Any other questions?
Hello, it's a question for anyone. Any advice or suggestions for effectively learning and researching about if you encounter a new paranormal topic? How should we go about learning about it? Thanks.
I would advise be data-driven. Exactly what I was talking about in the subject. Being data-driven means looking at getting the data, understanding the data, getting as much qualitative data as possible, and then making conclusions from it. Doesn't matter what it is. This sort of data-driven philosophy that I was talking about actually comes from people like Bernard, who's one of the top data strategists in the world. I've not looked at this from a paranormal point of view. I've looked at it from data point of view, AI and data strategy, and the best way to do it is being data driven. It's just a coincidence, for example, that the way that Ian Wark, who did his investigation, was naturally data driven. That's the way to be. The problem is with many of the investigations we do is we take our assumptions, whether we're believers or skeptics, and then we adapt the data to basically confirm our conclusions. Don't be like that. Instead, get the data, and if it turns out to be that the data doesn't turn out that what your conclusion or what your hypothesis means. It means that you've learned it anyway. So 99% of the time, you're going to find out that being data-driven means that something's explainable. However, personally, I've had paranormal experiences. When you do get those one or two chances where it actually is something real, you're going to get phenomenal results.
Is it okay if I answer? I just wanted to suggest, I came to this subject kicking and screaming, and I was not the least bit about looking into aliens, and I found the information really uncomfortable. But even having experienced this change and recognizing that this material was real, I really struggled with the alien subject. So what I do when I'm researching this stuff is I look at it from the standpoint of a preponderance of the evidence, right? It was discovering Dr. David Jacobs' books about abduction. It was discovering Dr. Carla Turner's. It was discovering all these alien groups that are channeling all the love and light and the ascension. So it took for me, yes, this is the information in Allies, but I had to look at a broad spectrum of things, and I go on civil court rather than criminal court. A lot of people want that absolute proof, no question, where I can put the pieces of the puzzle together. So whatever your subject, that would be what I would recommend.
I've got one little add-on for the last question there, and it was about the New World Order and about military cover-ups. Just a wee quick story I remembered for you. In my new book, shameless plug, the Hampshire and Surrey book, we interviewed a person in it from a famous UFO case. I don't know if any of you have heard of this. It was a man from 1983 called Alfred Burtu. You know that one? So it's an Aldershot, and Aldershot was still is the home of the British Army. And in 1983, he was a fisherman in the Basingstoke Canal, and he claims that two small figures met him and asked him into a cylindrical object where they scanned him and asked him his age. When he said how old he was on his next birthday, he says, you're not suitable for our project. When he went back to the fish and said, fair enough. So the next morning, the military police says, how was your fishing? Alfred, all good? See anything odd? And he went, a couple of the Gurkhas interviewed me, the Nepalese guys. And he says, it's probably just another one of the flying saucers around here. But the strangest thing was the chap that was researching the book for me down in Hampshire was a postman. Now, how hard do you think it was to find somebody called Burtu in Aldershot? It was great.
I just want to say, your question was for any kind of paranormal. So if somebody came to me and said they thought that they were possessed, because that was what was asked earlier, what would my initial thing would be to say to them, I would like you to go and have a psychiatric evaluation. I want that ruled out before I take anything any further. And from my side of it, I would then speak to people who could perhaps come in and help me with something like that. I wouldn't do it you shouldn't do it on your own. In the house, that was a different thing. But I wouldn't recommend doing exorcisms on your own. But the first step for me would be to rule out any psychiatric problems and do it with the full consent of the doctor.
Yeah, that's certainly one way to go about it. With SPI, with any given haunted house that we deal with, and Ronald back is up and Alison in that, we have to ensure that the people are being truthful, being honest, because believe it or not, people will make up a story just to get out of a house. They may not like the area and they cannot get the house for love nor money. How can we let's make a ghost story. So you have to check all that and make sure nobody's trying to pull the wool over your eyes. It very, very rarely happens, but it's there. But as far as your point goes with investigation, we work with some fantastic psychics. Ian Shanes is here today as well. Brilliant psychic. I've worked with him all my life, and he's come away with some fantastic stuff in haunted houses. Don't get me wrong, because there's a lot of nonsense out there. There's a lot of shenanigans. It's not everything is as it seems. A very, very small percent of paranormal happenings are the real deal. That's why we're all sitting here, because we know it's the real deal. But as far as investigation goes, we have to speak to the people, find out, is that house built on a burial site? No, that matters all the time. We have to dig deep to find out what is the cause of this disturbance in this family home, and if it's of the nastier side, as Alison says, then you really have to look at maybe psychiatry and stuff like that. Ronnie, you got any thoughts on that? Yeah, sure.
Okay, we've got 2 last questions. If we could keep them quick, please.
Hi, I've just got a question for Malcolm. So you were talking about the James Dean's car's curse. Right, we'll see Rebel Without a Cause. The 3 leading actors died fairly young. It was Natalie Wood, she was late 40s, I think, the boat accident. And then you get Sal, I think it's Sal Mineo, he gets stabbed to death. And James Dean, so just with his cars, that maybe James Dean in general could have been cursed? Or could it just have been tragic accidents? Or?
You're referring to James Dean's crash? Yeah. I mean, like I say, it could be. Why would you want to salvage parts out of a destroyed car and put into other cars? It's absolutely not the same with the aircraft. What do you want to do that for? But allegedly, it's like a haunted artifact. You're moving from a disaster zone into another one, and it causes all these problems. It could have been a coincidence with what happened to James Dean and other things like that as well. But like I said before, what is a coincidence? There's some strange things out there, and that's why we love this subject so much. Sorry if I couldn't answer your question. Very good. Anybody else?
Yep. Hi.
I know this fella here.
I've had the dubious honour of being both a ufologist and a cryptozoologist. First of all, well done, everyone. Great day. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks. Mark, my answer to you, my question to you rather, is all this hype about AI going to be, we've all seen the film Terminator. That's the extreme version of how dangerous AI could be. It's going to cost us jobs. Yes, I think everyone knows there's going to be a change of employment. But how dangerous is the possibility that AI could become, if you like, I'm not saying that's ridiculous, but come to a point where we refuse to be turned off? And my general question as a crypto and ufologist is, gentlemen, cryptology and ufology and paranormal and supernatural, I believe there is one common denominator between all the subjects. I think that it's probably a force that we're not aware of, some form of either electromagnetic or geomagnetic force that's creating this, and it's probably causing dimensional rifts at the same time. And your views on that, please. Thank you.
So I'll start. Just to let you know, Nigel Wright and Illian Bell are the chaps who've actually inspired me to be into AI. So Malcolm, Alison, Ron, Bill and Nigel have been really kind with me. And guys, I'm just pretty much like everybody else. And these people have been very kind to me and been very supportive. So when it comes to AI, the things about, say, for example, the killer sort of like robots, the Terminator, is completely, really completely exaggerated. The form of AI we have is called narrow AI or weak AI. Well, the sort of AI which is going to be killing everybody is called strong AI. Another way of describing that is artificial general intelligence. And to make an analogy between the two, imagine strong AI or AGI is like Knight Rider. Everybody from the 80s remember Knight Rider, but it had the car that could have the little red thing going back and forth, and it could speak, and it can drive and do whatever. Our AI that we have just now is like a scare, like a threat or a train set at best. Even stuff like ChatGPT, for example, it's really beyond, is not that advanced. To give an example or a comparison between our brains and ChatGPT, there's a thing called synapses within our brains, and that's what connects our brains to different brain cells, but also to nerves, glands, etc., etc. And we have about 170 trillion of these in our brains, while ChatGPT, the comparisons parameters, which is about 1 trillion. Now, the problem is that our cells, like one brain cell that we have, and we have trillions of them, is orders of magnitudes more advanced than even things like ChatGPT, for example. So just now we have 170 trillion, while ChatGPT has 1 trillion. even if they get to 107 trillion we have, or even 10 times or 100 that, we will still be orders of magnitude more advanced than any sort of AI. So we have to just put into comparison that AI is just not that advanced. Weak AI, which we have just now, is just not that powerful. While things like the BBC or the Guardian or whatever are kind of hyping it up, it's vastly exaggerated. So the thing like killer robots and like that is exaggerated. When it comes to jobs, there is risk. Now, even with extinction level AI, there is a legitimate risk. However, what I would say is vastly exaggerated. There are people, I can't remember the name of the organisation, are actually taking this very seriously. However, please understand that this is a hypothetical risk. A lot of the things like I was talking about in my talk are things like linear regression, k-means algorithms. These date back to the 19th century. It's the data that's made them so advanced. So it's not as dangerous as what everybody's making out. The thing about the jobs is a bit of a risk. However, even that's exaggerated. So, for example, before generative AI, which is like Dolly or ChatGPT came out, there was a survey came out that was that there would be about 600 million jobs lost. However, 700 million jobs would be gained. So there's more jobs, so there are vastly more jobs coming out because of generative AI or generative AI in general. So these things aren't discussed. While we hear about, even in all the media, about the job losses or the risks, these aren't discussed about the benefits, and there's vast benefits. So say, for example, even if you look at like medical physics or medicine in general, there's things about how to detect cancer, but it's not just one type of way of detecting cancer. There's about several different ways we can actually detect cancer and save lives. And it's not just even in healthcare, even like planes, for example. Rolls-Royce that actually produce like the aircraft, they're able to collect vast amounts of data on the engines. And you remember I was speaking about IoT. They've got IoT devices in the engines, and they're collecting about 40 different parameters per second per engine. And then what they do is they use that for predictive analytics to determine if an engine's got some sort of fault and actually fix it before the fault occurs. So that actually saved lives. So there's vast amounts of way that people save lives. Very lastly, sorry, John, I'm not talking about it, but even when within healthcare, there's again, this is not spoken about, is with children, with infants, and with babies, is that one of the things that's very difficult to do is actually detect oxygenation levels in babies. AI is able to do that. AI is able to detect cancer in children in women, and breast cancer, like several years before it's actually detectable by surgeons. Again, these sort of benefits are not discussed now. I'm not saying that there aren't risks with AI. It's just that there are vast benefits. What we need to do is actually have proper discussion about the pros and cons, and the ability to actually regulate AI and the dangers of it is actually having proper data. So the things I was talking about, data lineage, is actually a legitimate way and a more legitimate way of actually controlling the negative things of AI than restricting AI, as what like Elon Musk and all that are talking about.
Thank you. Excellent. So that now brings us to the tartan skull. I'll pass the tartan skull to Alison and then totally hand over to her. There you are. Have you got my...
So we've decided to award the tartan skull this year to Gary Wood. He's actually not here, but we will send this on to him. He has done a lot in the UFO community. He's given a lot of his time. He's done investigations, but he's most famous for being the abductee, one of the abductees in the A70 incident, and that story has been told in UFO conferences particularly around Britain, and I just think that he's given so much that he really deserves this award.
Yeah, just back up what Alison said there. Gary was prepared to stick his neck out. You know, he was abducted, and he stuck his neck out, was prepared to come forward and stand up for what he believed had happened to him. And despite all I think there was some ridicule, obviously, as you're always going to get. A lot of skepticism. He stuck to his guns. And I really think that he kind of stood up as a symbol of what ufology is all about. You know, no matter what you think about it, here's somebody who truly believed it, had an experience, and was willing to go out there and talk about it, face up to the press, face up to the media, and continues to say to people, yeah, this really happened to me. So I think he certainly deserves this award.
Okay, folks, we're moving on to the thank yous now. So, first one is I would like to thank at the back our man on AV, Grant. Thank you very much.
Take a bow.
Then we'll go for all the speakers. So I'd like to thank Mark, Larry, Alison, Ron, Malcolm, who kept it really short tonight, John, Kerry, and I'd like to thank all of you lot as well, because without an audience it would look bloody stupid. Thank you, audience. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, everyone. See you next year.
Yeah, Gordon, I'd like to thank you for conducting this whole event in that remarkable, calm, orderly manner that you always seem to do. Well done.